So good evening, this is a meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. It is 7 p.m. We have a quorum present. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any motions or suggested changes in the minutes for the last meeting?
Move approval?
Moved, seconded, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. Minutes are approved. Old business, text amendment to the zoning ordinance having to do with site development allowances, 14 PLMD 0102. We'll hear from the staff.
Well, staff at this point will just briefly summarize the memo that was in the packet. Staff is requesting continuance of this case again, this time to date certain being November 12th, the Plan Commission hearing. As we mentioned at the last Plan Commission meeting on the August 13th, staff was going to meet with the representatives from the Neighbors Association to present to them the proposed text amendment regarding the site development allowances. We've done that. We met with them on August 26th and also with the aldermen, and we had a really good discussion about the proposal and the overall Central Street Master Plan, the overlay district that was adopted, since the master plan was adopted. So we have some tasks to do to kind of research and modify the proposal about the site development allowances. And what staff wants to do is to present that to the Neighborhood Association before it's presented to public and the public hearing, Central Plan Commission. So at this point, I'm really not certain when that's going to take place. We'll have to schedule something probably end of this month at earliest, and then depending on how that goes, we'll have an update at the next meeting in November. Now, the reason we're not asking continuance for October, we anticipate a plan development to be submitted for next month. Usually those take a lot of time, so in addition to that, and the fact that we need additional time to research the site development allowances, staff is requesting to continue this case to November 12th.
Any questions or discussion? Any motions? Motion to continue this to November regularly scheduled meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion granted. That brings us to text amendment for Office of Financial Institution, which is B1 and B2 District, 14 PL 0045.
Again, a quick summary of this one. Staff is again requesting continuance to November 12th, 2014 Plan Commission meeting. This item was originally at the Plan Commission agenda in June. At that time, the Plan Commission sent the proposal back to the Zoning Committee. The Zoning Committee was supposed to take place last month in August. Staff has prepared some suggestions on how the office uses in B districts can be modified. And unfortunately, that meeting had to be canceled. And we typically schedule items for the Plan Commission before the Zoning Committee in August took place. So that's why we sort of anticipated that that proposal would go through the Zoning Committee. And unfortunately, that meeting was canceled. So that's why we're requesting that this item be continued to the November 12th so that the discussion can take place at the Zoning Committee next week, September 17th.
Any discussion or motions?
I'll move it. Continuous.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. That brings us to the text amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding daycare center, child and daycare center adult, in the C1 and C2 zones, 14 PLME 0106. And this 2 was scheduled for the zoning subcommittee, and unfortunately we didn't have a quorum. So it finds its way here. I'm trying to minimize the delay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the proposal is, to summarize, staff is recommending approval of the zoning ordinance text amendment to add daycare centers both for children and adults as special uses in C1 and C2 commercial districts. This was initiated when we received an application for a special use for a daycare center for children on Howard Street in the C1 zone commercial district. We found that for whatever reason, daycare centers are not permitted either as by right permitted uses or special uses in the C1 and C2 districts. Well, this is a map of the city of Evanston to some of the commercial districts. The C1 areas are throughout the city along the busy arterial roadways. They're designated for primarily strip centers and shopping centers for major commercial uses. And then the C2 district is the one that was created for commercial uses that tend to be a little bit more intense and may have more impact on surrounding property uses. And C2 districts are actually located along the railroad and then along Chicago. So we found that both daycare center for children and for the adults is regulated in the same manner throughout the zoning ordinance. They're only allowed as a permitted use in the research park, and then they're pretty much allowed as special uses in the same manner across the board. And that's why the city staff is recommending that this text amendment include both daycare centers for children and adults. So they're allowed in the residential districts as special use, in the C1A, as I mentioned, all B districts, all downtown districts, and then in some of the university districts. Daycare centers are not permitted in the manufacturing districts and industrial districts, and then again in some of the university districts. We find that both of these uses have very similar characteristics, and that's why they tend to be regulated in the same manner and fashion. The only difference that we saw is the D2 district. That's the district that in the two districts, that the daycare center for the adults is not permitted at all. Per zoning ordinance, when these uses are allowed, they do have to obtain a license for the City Department of Public Health. In our current proposal, we also are proposing to include that requirement that in C1 and C2 districts, the uses will have to get a license from the health department. As I mentioned, we found that both daycare centers are permitted as a special use in the C1A district. As I mentioned, that district is located along Chicago Avenue, and it was created to encourage mixed-use developments that have commercial spaces on the ground level and then residential uses on the top. As you know, Chicago Avenue corridor is characterized by a little bit smaller lots and buildings that are built to the lot lines, and those properties usually tend to have less parking areas available on site. C1 and C2 areas throughout the city, their characteristics are so that the building are generally set back further away from the street, and they have parking lots usually in front, and they have adequate parking spaces. And we find that actually daycare centers will probably fit better in these C1 and C2 districts because of the general layout of these shopping centers and the properties. The biggest issue with the daycare centers usually is the parking for pick-up and drop-off of either children or adults. And when you're looking at a property on, let's say on Chicago Avenue, that does not have any on-site parking spaces, and you compare that with the shopping center on Howard, with ample parking spaces, we feel that a daycare center could be more suitable for those locations, if not in the same fashion. Some of the other interesting features that we found is that both C1 and C2 districts do allow daycare centers for domestic animals, such as dog and daycare centers. Those you would think would generate a little bit more impact on surrounding properties than daycare centers for people. So we thought that was interesting. And then the other thing is that they are allowed as special use in all residential districts, but they're not in C1 and C2. And again, it is definitely not a residential use, and it's probably more appropriate in commercial districts than residential. So we believe that our proposal meets the standards for approval. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically with the goal to have a diverse range of businesses and commercial areas throughout the city. We believe that daycare centers are compatible with other existing and uses that are typically allowed in the commercial centers in C1 and C2. We are proposing to add this as a special use to both districts, similar to all the other districts in the city, and thereby the approval has to go to the zoning board of appeals, and then ultimately has to be approved by the city council, and the council can review and staff and the ZBA site characteristics of the proposal, times of operation, pick up and drop off areas, and that kind of stuff. So we believe that all standards have been met, and again, the special use process, we would assure that adequate public facilities are provided for the proposed location. With that, I will open to any questions.
I have a question. When you have a special use, you have a certain distance, a catchment area where you have to put out a notice. In the case of one of these shopping centers, is it just the owner of the shopping center who gets noticed, or is it each individual business that is presently located that would be impacted by pickup and drop off of parking?
For code, only the owners of properties or the taxpayers are notified. They have to be notified.
Taxpayer of record.
We post a sign on the window saying. this
Yes,
is
there's
such-
always there's always a sign posted on the property. If it's a storefront, it's in the window. If it's a standalone property, there's a freestanding sign.
So by extension, special use in an area which is predominantly rental residential, the owners only get notice, the taxpayer?
By the city, yes.
That bears the concern.
That's not consistent with the statute.
I'm sure it is.
If you want to change that, you can put it on the agenda when we talk about the rules.
Have any of the businesses in these areas been alerted that this is a consideration?
We've again reached out. What we usually do is we reach out to the economic development department. We ask them to notify their contacts of different merchant associations throughout the city. That's the way they do it.
Here, on page 2 of 3 of the memo from staff, memo dated September 4th, 2014. On page 2 of 3 at the top, there is a chart showing current regulations and proposed regulations. See that?
Yep.
What is an RP?
Research Park.
Oh, it's a research park, usually. Okay.
Okay, we do the downtown area.
Okay, so the next column, proposed regulations, the box is empty for permitted use. Does that mean it's a daycare center child is not going to be a permitted use anywhere?
No.
So by having an empty box, it doesn't mean that the RP is deleted.
Correct. We're not, and I apologize if there's any confusion of that. Our goal was not to change anything, the regulations about daycare centers in any other district except for C1 and C2 to add in special uses.
Got it. Clear.
Did staff consider the impact of a potential outdoor play area in some of these areas?
Yes, we have, and a lot of daycare centers have to comply with the state of Illinois requirements for these facilities, and they require a certain number of square feet per child. So that's something that usually cities don't get involved in, but that is something that it's usually addressed in the special use approval process. Usually it's a fenced-in area away from traffic, ideally, green space and not over an asphalt, but those things are kind of ironed out based on the location.
When we were discussing pet daycare centers, which may actually be a good parallel for some of these centers, the time that it opened and how long it was open was a big concern. How was that addressed?
it addressed?
I don't know, how is it addressing what we want to do with what we're proposing for us right now?
The good thing about this proposal is that we're not proposing to allow daycare centers by right anywhere. We're just adding it as a special use. And again, through a special use approval process, they have to provide us with their hours of operation, their sort of a plan for pick up and drop off. A lot of times, if they don't have a drive-in area where you can drop off your child, a lot of times there's designated parking spaces where people can go out there and kind of greet the child, bring it in, and make sure that it doesn't get any kind of traffic. So hours of operation, pickup and loading times, those are things that are addressed based on proposal on case-by-case basis.
So why are they permitted uses in the research program?
It's a good question. I do not know the answer to that.
Don't you suppose that that was part of the original proposal? That part of the plan for the research part was that you would have daycare integral with it to support the folks who were working. That would be my guess.
It's a university function.
Yes.
I would think that, these high-tech and these more contemporary office environments, to encourage them to locate there, a lot of them, if you look at Google's offices or something like that, they have on-site a lot of different kinds of amenities. They do have daycare facilities for their employees, so I agree with Commissioner Ford.
I'm not questioning the
Yeah.
need for
Yeah.
daycare centers. I'm questioning why it's treated differently in between the districts.
That would be my guess too. So.
Because we could consider it for business districts too. if we wanted to encourage.
What is the D2 district?
D2 district is part of the downtown area that's concentrated along Davis Street, I believe. It is more of a traditional downtown area that, among other things, includes some strict ziggurat setbacks. So the idea is to encourage development that is more consistent in that sort of traditional downtown Main Street environment, maybe lower height buildings. And I think for that reason, because it's more traditional and pedestrian environment, we felt that it's not appropriate for that specific area.
Could we go back to the question of space? Do the state requirements call for square footage per child of any kind, or do they call for square footage indoors and outdoors?
It is outdoors,
It's outdoors.
and there is a distance requirement as well.
Okay. I must say, this one makes me just a little uneasy. Plunking down a bunch of kids in the middle of a commercial area, I would want there to be outdoor space, but I would sure want that outdoor space to be somewhat not isolated, but protected, I suppose, from traffic and noise and the whole rest of it.
It can be somewhat creative on top of what was Walton's play areas on the roof.
May I say my piece? There are many daycare, childcare centers downtown. All federal office buildings have them, usually on a higher floor and well away from the street because of, I can't remember, the bombing of the office building.
Yeah.
And for many people, it's not a luxury. It's not.
Oh, no, I understand that.
It's a necessity.
Oh, yeah,
And,
yes.
It'd be great if there's outdoor space, but it would be nice if all of our kids could have that, but that doesn't concern me as much as, it would be great,
That's the
but,
availability.
yeah.
Okay.
Is that part of I don't think that's our role, is it? To determine that there should be outdoor space?
It would be.
I mean,
It
No, but
would be
it
relevant in
goes to
special use.
location.
And certainly be approving of how it impacts the environment.
Yeah. Which individual?
As we've been talking about this, we've been talking about as I've been listening to this, I think we've been talking about the impact on everybody except the kids. And I'm wondering what the impact of the kids is. How you manage the impact of the kids if they don't go to commercial.
They don't go out. Sometimes they don't go out. My kids got dropped off and went to the Dewey School basement morning and afternoon. They didn't leave. I mean, and I at that time, Dewey did not have a gymnasium that was, it was for all the additions. I think, yeah, it would be great if there could be, if it could be otherwise, but
Don't you have to make the assumption that parents are making the decision? In the marketplace, if it's in a lousy location, the marketplace will. Have we had an application, is that what's driving this?
Yes. I mean, initially triggered that, but again, we kind of explained, it was for, they just are for children, but this proposal is to include both for children and adults, because we feel it's a comprehensive approach to this. But yes, there was an application for a location on Howard.
And there was parking available?
Well, that's something that you figure out. As part of a multi-tenant building, there is parking in the back, access off the alley. And so that is a specific concern in terms of how many parking spaces are devoted to this particular space, how their hours of operation kind of work together with the surrounding uses that are in the same shopping center. And where are the drop-off loading parking spaces and access. And so all those things are considered as part of the special use.
I would think a location like that would have people bringing their kids in by bus, transferring to at Howard, Skokie Swift, or other people coming in by bus to pick up the red line or the purple line there, who wouldn't even have cars. It would be a huge convenience.
Where, on Howard, I know the address, but where?
1909.
What cross street?
Is that a Dodge and, that's the stop, northwest corner of Dodge and Howard?
What's on the corner? Is that the?
So one story,
It's a blind dog, and the other one is,
I'm having trouble.
There's a veteran center right in the shopping center where the proposed daycare is, you know where that is, it's at the corner.
that's the northwest corner, right?
Oh, it's at Dodge and Howard. So there used to be a restaurant, the Indian restaurant there?
blue
Oh, right.
International House in Canada.
No, that's not Dodge.
There's a Blockbuster, there's a daycare center.
So is it the northeast or northwest corner? Northwest, where the Indian restaurant used to be? That,
And I believe it's the very last unit to the west.
got it, okay.
Yeah.
Which is very close, walking distance to, I think, our largest park in the city, right? James Park. It's only like a block away.
I can't work there.
A couple blocks.
James.
Yeah, it's big, yeah.
1, 2, 3 blocks.
But there are other parks around there, so it's-
I think it's closer to the park that my kid goes to. My kid used to go to YMCA, so I used to hear the complaints. I had to walk all the way down to wherever. Are we taking a motion to approve the recommendation?
I can see much downside.
Let's just more discussion. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the end of our agenda. There's no more business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. We are adjourned.
The office use in the B districts will be discussed, and also active uses in the Central Street overlay district. We're going to add some additional active uses. So, fun discussion.
You'll send something out.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. Actually, it might even be tomorrow, because I'm not ready.
On vacation?
For him, it'll be a free Friday.
They're far and few to me.